Good evening again, everyone. My name is Peter, and I'm still a grateful recovering alcoholic. The message tonight is on step 10, and I entitled it, and I took it right out of the big book, is Entering the World of the Spirit. And then we used the scripture 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 7 and 8, and we'll get into that a little bit later as we go on. Step 10 is the first of the maintenance steps of steps 10, 11, and 12, which keeps us working in our program. And it says we continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, we promptly admitted it. So love, courage, tolerance, and patience. These are powerful things that we can use in our lives. Step 10 is here to nurture them and to make them grow and build in your lives. If we practice step 10, these things absolutely come true and grow in you. When I first started to work on step 10 many years ago, I thought, oh my God, I got to do another inventory. What goes on here? These steps are crazy. I just finished a very in-depth inventory in step 4, and it had brought up a lot of really crappy feelings and thoughts, and it was difficult to work through. And I really didn't want to revisit that sort of thing. And my sponsor said to me, don't worry about it. This is a daily inventory that you're doing. We're not going back into our past. And I really didn't want to go back there. I didn't want to go back and revisit the feelings of abandonment and abuse and any of the other ones that come up. I know many of you understand and know about them. And all those things that helped us feel less than or worth less than other people. My sponsor quickly explained that this was a checklist to see how our daily performance had been. It wasn't heading back into the old feelings and the old issues. We were to look only at this day, at today, whether we had offended anyone or whether we had let any of our defects of character slip back into our lives. He went on to say that we have to practice doing step 10 each and every day so we become proficient in this step, just like eating breakfast every day. We do our morning step 10 prayers, and in the evening we do our step 10 prayers, and it becomes a natural part of our lives and our prayer. This step is the first, as I said, of the maintenance steps. We have worked hard to get to this point. We've admitted that we're powerless over whatever substance is a problem with us. We've looked at the unmanageability in our lives. We've come to believe that maybe a power greater than ourselves out there could maybe restore us to sanity, and then we learned how to turn our will and our lives over to that power. Then of course we did that inventory that we didn't really like very much. We did our spiritual puke, our confession in step 5, and we moved on up to step 10. My sponsor also explained to me that this step takes a lot of practice and has to be done daily. Practice makes perfect, so to speak. Take a look at the scripture this week, 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 7 to 8. In verse 7 it says, "Do not waste time arguing over godless ideas and old wives' tales. Spend your time and energy training yourself for spiritual fitness." And 8, it says, "Physical exercise has some value, but spiritual exercise is more important, for its promises a reward in this life and in the next." In this scripture, Paul was writing to Timothy and told him to spend his time and energy in training himself for spiritual fitness. Physical exercise has some value, but spiritual exercise is far more important. In Paul's time, exercise referred specifically to the discipline of training by young athletes that were going to compete in world events or in national events and whatnot. It didn't really talk about going to the gym every day. It was more of a gymnastic so to speak. We could take from that we have to put our spiritual practices to use every day. We need to strengthen our spiritual muscles through consistent effort and daily discipline. The spiritual principles here are vigilance and perseverance. For me, step 10 has grown into a very active daily function. One that if I don't do it, or I find that I've missed doing some of my morning prayers, I have to stop partway through my day and revisit them and do them. Things don't go well if I don't do that part early in the morning. If I find things not going well, I stop and I do my prayers, and I use the serenity prayer many times in a day. I don't know about you guys, but I find that this one is one of the most important things I do in my recovery each and every day. Myself, living in the here and now, living life one day at a time. If we take a look at the big book, page 84, they are talking about step 10. We have cleaned up our past, and now we're entering the world of the Spirit. The big book says this is not an overnight matter, and it should continue for a lifetime. We have to continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentments, and fear. And what do we do when they crop up? And I guarantee you they will from time to time, and maybe on a daily basis for a while. It says we ask God at once to remove them. We discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Then we turn our thoughts to someone that we can help. So we do all of that, and then we get out of ourselves, out of our self-centeredness, and we go out and help somebody else. Always remembering that love and tolerance of others are our code. A number of years back, I think it was back about 2013, I had the honor and the pleasure of attending the Betty Ford recovery clinic for a week. And many of us went, and we were put into different groups as part of and I was part of their residential day treatment program. Many of the other participants were doctors, anesthesiologists, lawyers. There was a couple of sheriffs, and there was a couple of lawyers that defended sheriffs, all in the program because of their addictions. They all lived off campus in homes provided by the Betty Ford Treatment Center. We did group together each and every day and took part in all of their treatment that week. The one event that I was really happy to take part in was joining a group of men in their homes, first off for dinner and the fellowship around the dinner, and then taking part in their daily 10-step meeting. So each of the groups that lived in the homes at night, there was a mandatory meeting, and it was a step 10 meeting before they called it a night. They had the meeting in which each member of the household had to attend. It was mandatory. And during that meeting, they had a little sheet that they followed. They read a paragraph to introduce step 10, and they went around the room and they talked about whether they were resentful and what they might be resentful for. Were they selfish? Were they dishonest? Were they afraid, anxious, stressed, fearful? Do they owe anybody an apology? And what defects of character had slipped back into their lives that day? I'll tell you, it was an exciting meeting. It was a very meaningful meeting, and one that everyone took part in, and it was very clear. It was very clear that it was a necessary part of their recovery and their program. We discovered many defects of character were slipping back in, and maybe some resentments as well. There was a person that traveled with us, I'm not going to mention any names, I don't think you would know her, from Edmonton, that was really not behaving the way they should, and resentments came. And we had an opportunity to talk about that person and get rid of the resentments, and actually prayed for them at the end of that evening. It was an awesome experience, and we all have some defects, and it caused great discussions. It felt good to talk about these feelings and to get our side of the street all cleaned up. It was at that meeting that I was awarded my camel pin. And at that point in time, I hadn't really ever seen or heard of, and I don't know if it was my ignorance, but a camel pin. And the story about the camel pin goes like this. The camel each day goes twice to his knees. He picks up his load with the greatest of ease. He walks through the day with his head held high and stays that day completely dry. The spiritual principles around this are prayer, faith, spirituality, sobriety, and living our lives one day at a time. It was Dr. Bob and the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous would explain prayer by telling how the camel in a caravan would kneel down in the evenings, and the men would unload the burdens. In the mornings they would kneel down again, the camels would, and the men would put the burdens back on their camels. It's the same with prayer, Dr. Bob would say. We get on our knees to unload at night, and in the mornings we get to our knees again. God gives us just the load we're able to carry for that day. The camel prayer is, the tasks of the day can pass with ease when a camel or I start on my knees. One master we serve, the camel and I, and stay for that day completely dry. So the camel pin is something that they award there, and it's very meaningful, and it's quite good. And I know we give out the camel coin to the members of Drug Court who have successfully been with us and clean and sober for 1 year. And it's an awesome reminder. All this being said, because it becomes quite obvious that prayer is the main focus of our spiritual growth. I believe in the power of prayer as it works in my life and in the lives of those around me who choose to pray. And I know a smart guy that I hang around with a lot once told me when he's troubled for the day and a lot of things are going on, really bad things are going on, and he thinks he's going to have trouble sleeping at night, he prays to God to take those troubles away from him just for that night. So it's like the camel. He says, unload this tonight, God. Let me have a good night's sleep so I can rest up, and then give it back to me in the morning so I can carry it again tomorrow. Do you remember who that was? Okay. And that was some of the best advice I'd had for a long time, because it works. It works. We know that prayer works, and we know that if we ask God to help us through those troubled times, that He will. When my sponsees call with a problem, and I share with them 2 simple solutions to most of our problems. I'll ask them first if they've been to a meeting lately, and then secondly, I'll ask them if they've prayed. They like to tease me about it, and many of them do, but they'll call a few days later and say, you know what, I've started praying again, and things are starting to come back together. I started many years ago when I was working at CYOC doing AA meetings and then mentoring some of the boys. A lot of the guys would complain about, they complain about the teachers, they complain about the staff, they complain about almost everything that there is to complain about in jail. And I started with them saying, do you have any faith? And most of them would say, yes, we have some. And then I challenged them to do a 21-day prayer. And I know that a few of you have heard this before and have tried it, and it does work. So I challenged them to pray each and every day. Pray in the morning when they get up, and pray again in the evening, a prayer of gratitude before they go to bed. And if it doesn't change their life, if things don't get better for them, then after 21 days they can quit. Strangely enough, most of them don't. And many of them, if they're being honest, will tell you, yes, it does help. It really, really helps do the prayer. I also talked to them about the use of the Serenity Prayer. And when I was in early recovery, I used it many, many times a day. In fact, some days, I think it was the only thing that got me through. Not surprising, most will agree that things get much better when we start doing that. There's another scripture that talks about prayer that I like to use, and it's 1 Thessalonians, if you can say it, you're good, 16 and 18. And it tells us to be joyful and to keep on praying no matter what happens. Always be thankful, because this is God's will for you. We know that life is much better when we live it one day at a time. To do this, we must ask for God's help and stay focused in the here and now. We must start our day with prayer, end it with prayer, and pray as many times as we need to during that day. So I would encourage you to do a few things as you enter the world of the Spirit. 1, develop a format for your daily inventory that explores both your strengths and your weaknesses. Make a commitment to practice this inventory on a daily basis until it becomes an habitual part of your day. Recognize your personal strengths and also recognize your weaknesses. Use a journal to document and track the strengths and the weaknesses. Use your strengths to provide service to others. Make an effort to admit your weaknesses and take action to improve on those areas. Practice these steps and you will be amazed at the results and your progress in your spiritual journey. I sure have been. Having an attitude of gratitude, I would like to give thanks for all of you who are here, for being in my life and for the life of this church, for taking part in and supporting the missions of this church. I've learned so much from each and every one of you, and from the leaders here at this church. I've learned over the years that this is a safe place to grow in my spiritual journey, and it certainly has been a big part of my life, entering the world of the Spirit, and it's my prayer that the same is true for you. Thank you, and God bless. Join me.